While teams start to settle in about a quarter of the way through the season, it's pretty clear, if it maybe wasn't already in the preseason, which teams are legit, which teams are having surprising early strong starts to the season, and which teams are going to be lottery bound. Because while yes, 17 to 20 games into an NBA season is a small sample size, and we have seen instances of teams correcting or course correcting and righting the ship halfway through the year, regardless, a quarter of the way through the season can tell us a lot about a given team and where they stand among the rest of the league. But in the early going of this season, there are a few teams that have been somewhat questionable as to their future, and not only for this season, but for the seasons to come. And one of the more surprising teams that has gotten off to an average start, a team that had such a good season last year and exceeded expectations, winning 51 games on the year and ranked first in the league in defense, to now barely being able to stay above 500 with some bad losses to show for it in the early going. And yes, I'm talking about the Cleveland Cavaliers, who we're going to dive into why they're falling below expectations so far this season and why this year is so critical for them and their future. As always, if you're new to the channel, you like this type of content, then be sure to subscribe to help the channel grow, and in return I'll be providing more NBA content like this. Now, going into the season, most people assumed the Cavs were going to be one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. In fact, most media outlets' preseason power rankings, you saw the Cavs in the top 3 along with the Bucks and the Boston Celtics. And even for those who did not have the Cavs in the top 3 in the East, not a single one had them outside of the top 4. And it made sense because you're talking about a team that, yes, bombed in the playoffs in the first round, which I'll get to, but a team that retained their core, but also added Max Strus in the offseason to help with their overall offense, which was still good, but adding another shooting threat to the already #1 ranked defense in the league, a team of young players who you would assume would only get better as they enter their primes, with the likes of Evan Mobley, Darius Garland, Jarret Allen, even Isaac Okoro, and then of course their superstar, the star they traded a good amount of their future for, in Donovan Mitchell. Like, it was easily conceivable to think that this was going to be a top 3 team in the Eastern Conference. Now granted, as I said before, it's still early and it's very possible the Cavs could end up finishing in the top 3 in the East. But early returns on the year are not good for this team, and at the time of this recording are currently sitting 500, 9th in the Eastern Conference. Their offense, despite adding Max Strus, has gotten considerably worse, as they are 22nd in the league both in points per game as well as offensive rating. But what's been more shocking is just how much they've regressed on the defensive end. A team that was the best team in the league on defense last year is currently 17th. Teams are lighting up the Cavs, getting to the foul line, and rather than taking it inside against some of their better defenders in Mobley and Allen, teams are making Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell work on the defensive end. Teams are starting to figure it out. If you just work on the perimeter rather than trying to play in the pick and roll, but space the floor, move the ball around on the perimeter, and even play isolation and go one-on-one against Mitchell or Garland, you are much more likely to generate offense against this team. Case in point, teams are taking and making threes at a much higher rate than they were last season, with opposing teams hitting 15% more threes than they did against the Cavs last year. And teams have been able to get to the line at an exceptionally higher rate when just trying to beat one of their guards off the dribble and drawing contact on the way to the hoop. Not only that, but the Cavs for some reason haven't been rebounding the ball as well, with teams getting second chance points off the Cavs better than any other team in the league aside from the Detroit Pistons so far this year. They're 21st in the NBA in offensive rebounds allowed, which is an increase of nearly 20% from last season. And when teams are getting those offensive rebounds, they're converting on those second chance opportunities 60% of the time. That is insane. And don't even get me started on their offense, which has been comically bad for how much talent they have on their team. And yes, I'm fully aware this is coming from a Bulls fan whose offense is even worse, but we're not talking about the Bulls here. And the Bulls offense was already bad last season. But for the Cavs, they actually shoot the ball overall pretty well, 47% from the field, which is above league average, but because their overall pace is so slow, they don't get up enough shots per 100 possessions. And they're currently 26th in the league in overall shot attempts. And they're also not a good three-point shooting team, which we know is critical in today's NBA to have any amount of success in the league. And so while I do think the Cavs will get better, I don't think they're going to finish in the 8 to 10 range in the East at their current trend. I do think they'll pick things up a bit and find themselves sitting in the top 6. But the bigger concern to me, if I'm a Cavs fan, is the overall demeanor and lack of intensity this team displays when they're on the court, the lack of urgency, if you will. Because here's the thing, yes, this team is young. Yes, they know they have the talent that they can afford some bad losses here and there and pick things up later on down the season. But people forget, The Cavs traded away 3 first-round draft picks, all unprotected, as well as 2 pick swaps and Lauri Markkanen, Obagi, and Colin Sexton to the Utah Jazz for Donovan Mitchell. As good as Mitchell is and has been great for them, that is a lot of their future for a player who has had a lot of regular season success, but not much postseason success. And a player who has been on record saying he wants to play in New York, and a player who has 1 more year left on his contract, or he could become an unrestricted free agent if he declines the player option in the final year of his deal. So for the Cavs, as much as they can think, we've got time to figure this out, it's not like we're the Clippers who went all in on all of these old superstars and have such a narrow window to win now. For the Cavs, their window to win is actually smaller than you think, simply because they could very well lose Donovan Mitchell if they don't figure things out in the next season or 2. Donovan Mitchell is not going to want to hang around on a mid-team that is hovering around 500 in a small market like Cleveland. Yes, I'm aware he played on the Jazz, but that team was the one that drafted him, developed him, and gave him that max contract, and he played for that team being much younger in his career. Donovan Mitchell is a superstar player now, in the peak of his prime at age 27, and is going to want to be in the best position to win and also be in one of the biggest markets in his home state in New York if the Cavs don't get it together. Last season, everything was great. Mitchell had one of his best seasons, had an incredible starting 5 around him, had an elite defensive team which enabled him to focus on offense, and they won 51 games. But if the Cavs continue to perform in the manner they have been, you're talking about some doubts creeping into Donovan Mitchell's mind and whether he wants to sign an extension to stay here. And if the Cavs lose Donovan Mitchell, especially if they lose him for nothing, which you'd have to hope if they get any kind of inkling that he might leave, they'd look to trade him or do a sign and trade of some kind. But if they lose Donovan Mitchell, and you consider the amount the Cavs had to give up to get him, all of those picks, young players, including one that has already broken out into an all-star in Lauri Markkanen, that is a tough pill to swallow and put some serious uncertainty into the overall future of this franchise. Because even though, yes, they still have the talented young core they currently possess in Garland, Mobley, Jarret Allen, even though Garland and Allen are off to slow starts so far this season, even though you would still have a youngish core, without Donovan Mitchell, I think most will agree that this team isn't going to be making any deep run into the playoffs. And with all of those picks, it limits their ability to trade for another star-level player, or further build around the core they have by way of the draft. And maybe it's just me, but you're almost kind of seeing it in the players' faces on the court that something is off. Like they're not feeling the vibe they had last season, and maybe it's that playoff performance is still lingering in the back of their minds, but that's what has me concerned more than anything for the Cleveland Cavaliers, because we can always say, hey, it's just a slowish start, it happens. But when you're seeing a noticeable difference in the demeanor and attitude of the players, that's telling when it comes to what we can expect for the rest of the season. I would love to hear what you guys think though. Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.